Okay, so my sweet and lovely class, here we are again, back with the continuation of the chapter called the Delhi Sultanate. And we all know that we talked in detail about the various dynasties which ruled, the kings which came to power, and the way they governed and looked after their kingdom, trying to consolidate the Delhi Sultanate, the areas around it, checking for the Mongol attacks, checking for the nobles coming to power, curbing them, stopping them, then even making a southward expansion in India, trying to manipulate with the kings, the various dynasties in the south. Some of them were able to uh, gain supremacy. Yet, as they turned their backs, the southern part of India declared themselves free every time. So today we take up the Sayyids. The last time we finished the Tughlaq dynasty, where in detail we talked about the various Tughlaq rulers, and we talked of how Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who was a wise king, yet he was much ahead of his thinking, much ahead of his times in thinking. So he was called as a mixture of opposites. Then Firoz Shah, and it was he who was a very staunch Muslim ruler. He tried to praise the ulemas and the nobles by giving them hereditary jagirs, making a large army based on the feudal system, and we move on to the Sayyids. Okay, now the Sayyid Sultans ruled for a brief period. There were four Sayyid kings. Khizr Khan became the first Sayyid ruler. So all you need to know is the chart which I told you. Go through that chart and you'll see that the first among them was to start the Sayyid dynasty was the Khizr Khan Sayyid. The dates are given 1414, 1421. Now it was a short period, for a very brief period they had lived. Now Khizr Khan was the governor of Multan under Firoz Shah Tughlaq. After the death of Firoz, he supported a son of Firoz in the war of succession. When Timur attacked India, he joined him. When Timur left India, he appointed Khizr Khan as the governor of Multan, Lahore, and Dipalpur. Underline these places. Now, Khizr Khan conquered Delhi in 1414 and started the rule of the Sayyids. So, we very clearly know that he was the ruler of Multan. Multan is the area in Pakistan. Now, he was ruling there and he was the governor there, sorry. And after the death of Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he went for the war of, there was a war of succession. Now, what is war of succession? That means the sons of Firoz Shah Tughlaq started fighting among themselves to occupy the throne. So there was a war for succession. That means who will be the next successor to come into the power. So in that, he joined hands with the sons of Firoz Shah, but then he realized that their sons are weak rulers. At that very time, when Timur attacked in 1398, you remember earlier we read in 1398 AD the invasion of Timur-Lang. So he helped Timur, Timur-Lang, sorry. And so when Timur went back, he went back to from where he had come, the Central Asia. He went back after conquering India. And what he did was he appointed Khizr Khan as his governor in Multan, Lahore, and Dipalpur. That means these three other places, two other places were given to him. He already was the governor of Multan. He was helping Firoz Shah's sons to acquire the power. At that very time, Timur invaded India. He supported Timur. He supported an outsider. And Timur was so happy that while he was returning, he made him the governor of Multan, Lahore, and Dipalpur. And so he later on in 1414 saw that the king's ruling The Tughlaq kings who were ruling, they were weak rulers, and he occupied the throne of Delhi, the Sultanate of Delhi, in 1414 and started the Syed rule. Now, after him was Mubarak Shah Syed from 1421 to 1434. Now, Mubarak Shah succeeded his father. He was a man of vision and could have revived the old glory of the Sultanate. The nobles, however, were against him. Most of his time was therefore spent in controlling his nobles. So, though Mubarak Shah was a capable ruler, a very efficient one, and he could have found the glory of the Delhi Sultanate back to him, but then the nobles kept threatening him, and he was most of the time during his succession, he was busy in controlling these nobles. Then we talk of Muhammad Shah Syed, 1434 to 1444, 43. You can see how small periods they have been ruling. 10 years, 4 years, 5 years, like that. Okay. So Muhammad Shah was Mubarak Shah's nephew. During his reign, the nobles became very powerful. So you can understand, Mubarak Shah had a problem. After him, his nephew came to power. Even he had to face the same growing power of the nobles who were not ready to accept him as the king. Then came Allauddin Alam Shah Syed from 1443 to 1451. Now, Alam Shah was the next ruler. He lost Delhi to Bahlul Lodi. Please underline that in 1451. With this, the brief rule of the Syed kings came to an end. So Alam Shah, Allauddin Alam Shah Syed, he was the last ruler of the Syed dynasty, after which he was overthrown by a man called Bahlul Lodhi, and he took over and started the Lodi dynasty. Now, the Lodi dynasty had greater achievements than the Tughlaqs and the Sayyids. However, its history is full of conflict. Up till now, all the rulers of Sultanate were of Turkish origin. The Lodhis, however, were Afghans. Alam Shah, the last Sayyid ruler, voluntarily abducted throne in favor of Bahlul Lodi. Now, Alam Shah, Allauddin Alam Shah, the last Sayyid ruler, he knew his capabilities. So he knew that Bahlul Lodi is a powerful ruler. So he himself abducted. Abducted means he left and went away, ran away. Okay, so he voluntarily means of his own choice. So by his own choice, he gave away the throne to Bahlul Lodi. And this Sayyid earlier, the Turkish rulers were ruling. That means when we talk of the others, the Mamulik slaves, the slave dynasty kings, the the Khaljis, the Tughlaq, and the Sayyids, all these were Turkish. They came from Turkey, whereas this they came from Afghanistan and they were Afghan rulers. Okay, the Lodhis. Now, the first among them was Bahlul Lodi. Now, the first Lodi ruler was Bahlul Lodi. He tried to consolidate the fragmented Sultanate. He removed rebellious governors and appointed loyal Afghan nobles as governors of important provinces. At the time of his death, the Sultanate stretched from Punjab to, just a second, to Bihar. So now they are telling you Bahlul Lodi, once he came to power in 1451 till 1489, what he did was he took to consolidating the empire. That means he wanted to construct the empire powerful. Whatever provinces, whatever kingdom was under him, he did not thought of expanding it. He tried to work upon in consolidating it, making it united. And for that, he first thing what he did was he removed all the rebellious nobles. Unko hata diya. Those who were ruling as governors and nobles, and he appointed fresh Afghan nobles. That means of his own country, of his own people. He appointed them in the various important provinces. And the result of this was he was able to stretch his empire from Punjab till Bihar. It was a huge empire also at that time. Please switch off your mic. Now we talk of Sikandar Lodi. Now, his reign began from 1489 to 1517. The most powerful Lodi ruler was Bahlul's son, Sikandar Lodi. He annexed Jaunpur and Bihar and signed a treaty of friendship with the ruler of Bengal. He also initiated many public welfare measures. For example, agriculture was improved and efforts were made to keep the prices of essential commodities low. He established the city of Agra and made it his capital. So it was Sikandar Lodi who was a powerful and, you know, a very thoughtful king. He annexed Jaunpur and Bihar, and he did not took hold of the total power. What he did was he made friendship with the rulers of Bengal who were ruling at that time, and this helped because Bengal was a little far from Delhi. It was on the other eastern side of India, so to reach there and to look after the kingdom was difficult anyhow. So what he did was he went, conquered, yet became friends with the king of Bengal and gave back the kingdom. But in return, he collected revenue from them. Now, apart from this, he was into public welfare work for people and he tried to improve the conditions. The agricultural commodities were given at low prices. All the essential prices of the things which were needed were of were of low prices. Okay, so in this way, he was able to establish his control. He also built a city called Agra. Okay, you must have seen it is in UP where your Taj Mahal is. So that was it. Then we talk of Ibrahim Lodi, the last of the Lodis. Now, he ruled from 1517 to 1526. Let's see. Now, Ibrahim Lodi succeeded Sikandar Lodi. The Afghan nobles rebelled against him. He, however, defeated them to prevent such revolts in future. Ibrahim Lodi replaced senior nobles and governors who exercised a great deal of power by younger men. These nobles conspired with Babur, who overthrew Ibrahim Lodi in 1526 at the First Battle of Panipat. Please remember these dates: invasion of Timur-Lang in 1398, then all these Syed rulers' dates, the coming of the Khizr Khan when he came to power in 1414, then the Lodi dynasty kings, and then the last is 1526 when the first battle of Panipat was fought. So Ibrahim Lodi, when he came to power, now the Afghans who did not, the nobles did not accept him. So what he did was he also replaced the old nobles with the younger men of his origin only. That means the nobles who were now appointed were also Afghans, but they were young. And the old ones who had established their power were removed. He dealt with them efficiently, but then these nobles who were ruling there, who were removed, they tried to overthrow him by conspiring with Babur. Now, Babur was a Muslim ruler and he came to India, and we will read about him in the next chapter when we talk of the Mughals. Okay, so he was a Mughal ruler, Babur, and he came to India, and the first battle of Panipat was fought in 1526 AD with Ibrahim Lodi and Babur, in which Babur defeated Ibrahim Lodi, and then came the end of the Delhi Sultanate. So let us now go through the development of political institutions during the Sultanate period. That means what were the political conditions, how there were developments under the Sultanate period. That means we will take all the Sultanate rulers into one account and we will see what all these people did in together as Sultanate, as the kings of the Sultanate and looked after the kingdom. That means from the coming of the Afghans, that means the first Qutbuddin Aibak down till the last Lodi ruler, Ibrahim Lodi. So we will be taking the development of the political situations, the political institutions which were there. Okay, political means the politics which was going on, how they ruled, who was the supreme power. That means we all know that the king was all in all, the sultanate was under him, whereas he gave the provinces and other important posts to his nobles. There were chalisas, you remember, the 40 nobles, etc., etc. How they kept the ulemas happy, what was the style, why were they, one of them was even called the uh, king of Hindustan, the Sultan of Hindustan, because by, by the various ulemas, etc., just to see his, just to acknowledge his, the Sultan of Hindustan. He was called by the Caliph of Baghdad, Iltutmish. Okay, so now we'll read about the development. The Sultanate of Delhi was a theocracy. That means in theory. Okay, Islam was the religion of the state. So the basic religion they followed was Islam. All the sources of the state were meant for the protection and spread of Islam. So whatever the kings did, they did for the establishment of Islam and protection of it. Now, the government of Delhi Sultanate was a Turco-Persian system in Indian setting. Now, we all know it was the Indian soil. The people had come from Turkey and Persia. So they were Turco-Persian system of government, which was there followed by all the kings. Now, the Sultan was the head of the Delhi Sultanate. So we all know the various sultans who came, they were all in all powerful. They were the head. He was the sovereign and head and commander of the army. So sovereign means all in all powerful. He was holding all the powers. He had the control over the army. He was recognized as the supreme interpreter of the law, and he was considered as the one who would impart justice. He would be the follower of the law. Now, the ulema used to the supreme interpret the Quran in favor of the authority of the Sultan, and the Sultan in turn favored them with high offices and rich adornments. So, ulemas were the religious priests during those times, and they were given quite respect by nearly all the sultans. Why? Because they helped them to follow the Quran. Whatever there was there in Quran, whatever was written in that, they helped in telling the right ways to the sultans to rule. And even if they went for battle, now nobody says, no holy book says that you can go and conquer the other person, have a bloodshed in the war, etc., etc. But ulemas used to interpret it and say, maybe the book says, the Quran says that you should have the power, you should be doing things to help your people. So, helping people by going and conquering the others. So, they helped in just favoring the kings somehow. And in return, the favors made by the ulemas, that means the religious priests, was returned with rich gifts, etc., by giving them power. In fact, the ulema was a political force that no sultan could dare to ignore. So ulemas were so powerful that any sultan who came to power, they did not have the guts. They should not ignore the ulemas, the religious background. Otherwise, the people might think that the king is not God fearing. So ulemas enjoyed the most power. Then the nobles too put a very effective check on the power of the sultan. Sometimes the nobles became more powerful than the sultan. So we know this, and we have seen this in all the various sultans whom we read earlier. Now, the sultan was assisted in administration by a number of ministers. Now, anyhow, one person cannot have all in all cannot be all in all powerful and look after the whole affair. So he had appointed certain ministers or the nobles. So the various administrative ministers were the wazir. You should know the names properly, okay? The names which are referred, the post which they had. So the wazir, then the the divan e rasalat, and the divan e quaza, the divan e insha, and the sadr us sudur. Please underline these words. Now, the wazir or the chief minister. So, See, we all know the chief minister because that term is easy to remember. But what was at that time a chief minister called? He was called Wazir. Now he stood midway between the state and the subjects. That means the king directly was not available for all his subjects. So it was the chief minister through him. He acted as a center point, meeting point for the king and the subject. Subject means the kingdom people. Some of the wazirs were so powerful that they virtually ruled the kingdom and the sultan was merely a puppet. Now, some of the wazirs were all in all so powerful that the sultan acted as a puppet. You know what a puppet is? Katputli. Okay. Now, Malik was the head of the Ministry of War. Underline Malik and head of the Ministry of War. That means whatever war was going to take place, Malik was the head who initiated that war. Then the Divane Insha dealt with royal correspondence. Divane Insha, he worked for communication. Whatever letters, whatever decrees were to be made, whatever act was to be drawn, all the written work, correspondence, that means you communicate and get things in writing, was done by Divane Insha. Then Divane Rasalat dealt with religious matters and was also in charge of the grant of stipends to scholars and pious men. So basically, it was Divane Rasalat was the man who was dealing with the religious matters, and whoever was qualified among them in the religious matters was given scholarships and stipends to the scholars who were studying the religious things. He was in charge of the religious affairs in the country. Then we come on to the Sadr us Sudur, was responsible for enforcing Islamic rules and regulations. So everything to be dealt in Islamic way because the state religion was Islam at that time. So everything was to be done by the Islamic rules and the regulations were to be followed. Then Divane Qaza also did the same job. That means he also looked after and enforced the Islamic rules and regulations. Then Baride Mamalik was the head of the state news agencies. So that means the whatever updation of the news was, whatever they had to say about the king, about the updation to the people, it was done by Baride Mamalik. Below the ministers, there were important officers like Vakile Dar or chief dignitary of the royal household. Now, Dar was the person who was in charge in the royal court in the kingdom, who looked after he, small affairs like what is needed in the kingdom, in the house. Okay, all the household of the royal people who were living in the kingdom was looked after. Then and Tsar A Jandar was who commanded the king's bodyguards, etc. So the bodyguards, the king had bodyguards, and those were appointed and looked after by Sir A Jandar. I hope I'm clear till here. Now the provincial government, just a little portion left. The provincial government reflected the same setup as at the center. The heads of the provinces were known as Wali and Mufti. A pargana was headed by an Amil. So now, state government, like we have, and we have central government in India now. Central government is in Delhi, and the state governments are in various states. Same was the case earlier also. It was the head, the king was the head. He had various chief ministers, and we know the names also. Then there were certain commanders. Then at the provincial level, that means at the states level also, they had heads of the provinces who were known as Wali and Muftis. And the Pargana is a smaller unit of a state, like mayor maybe. So every city may be having a mayor. So in the same way, every pargana at that time was headed by an amil. I hope I'm clear till here. Is this much clear to each one of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So please, I will be in the evening. I will be sending